Welcome to Licensed Psychologist Now What? A podcast about the journey psychologists and psychotherapists go through as they reclaim their intuition and unleash their healing gifts while maneuvering, getting licensed, life, and making a living. And although this podcast host and many of the guests are mental health professionals, the information provided is not meant to be a substitute for being diagnosed and treated by a licensed mental health, medical, and related professionals, or for supervision and/or consultation purposes. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Licensed Psychologist Now What? I still feel like I'm going to say the Beyond Resilience Life, but I'm not. It's still there. Today, I have the honor and privilege to introduce to you all, if you haven't yet, to Rosa Shetty, and she is a licensed clinical social worker. I met her again via Instagram. I feel like I have all this community of Instagram psychotherapists and psychologists and social workers, and it's been really fun. I feel like the pandemic, in a way, got in the way because otherwise we would have been able to maybe do some coffee in person and stuff like that, because I know you're also local to LA. Yeah. But I wanted to introduce to you all, and please welcome Rosa. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Liliana. This is, I know we've been talking about this for a few months, maybe 2 months. So I'm glad we finally were able to make it happen.
I know. And I know Rosa also has a podcast herself, and in 2 weeks,
Yeah, I think it's in 2 weeks. Yes.
Something like that. It will be the recording. Probably as you're listening to this, you're like, context is so out of it because it's coming in a different time. So probably that episode is already out. I don't know, but check that out and she'll share more about it. But talking about that, can you please tell us a little bit more about you, your services, and what do you love the most?
Yeah, so I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I am a licensed clinical social worker, I'm in mental health. So I do therapy. I help folks specifically recover from trauma. I focus a lot on complex trauma, sexual abuse, and a lot of physical abuse and neglect in childhood. And so I work with adults that are recovering from the effects of trauma. And I use a lot of, my specialty specifically is in EMDR. Recently, I've been learning havening, and I'm in the process of getting credential with havening, which is a very somatic, but also energetic tool that I've been really, really just interested in right now. So I use a more body-oriented approach. I also incorporate a lot of spirituality into the work that I do. I work with parts, connecting with their inner child. And for the folks that are open to it, I do a lot of ancestral work as well, focusing on those ancestral toxic patterns, also, known as generational patterns. And, we delve into a lot, when I'm working with someone. That's more or less about me. I think you asked why I love what I do.
What do you love the most?
Okay. So honestly, one of the greatest privilege and just joys for me is to be able to guide folks back to their own medicina, back to their own medicine. I feel that as a therapist, my role is really to connect them and to help them tap into that part within themselves that is already wise, that is already whole and healed, and just the wiser part of them that sees everything, that knows everything. And part of the goal of trauma-focused therapy is to connect them to that wiser part within themselves. So then that way they can be their own healers. So they can be their own, connect to their own medicine. And so that's more or less of what I just love about the work that I do, is to be able to guide folks back to themselves, back to the core of who they really are.
That resonates so much. And at the same time, I'm here I feel like we're talking the same language. And at the same time, I feel, there's been this movement of Instagram therapy and self-healing. And then there's been so much criticism about moving completely away from diagnosing, or because in trainings like EMDR, that I'm also trained in EMDR, we don't talk about helping people to get back to themselves. We talk about take those symptoms away, process trauma, transform memories and integrate stuff. But there's no talk of, at least when I got the training or in other trauma trainings, about helping them come back to that, or even talking about inner child or ancestral healing. So when we talk about this, and I just want to get your view, so the audience that is also listening, even students and newly graduates that are coming out and they're seeing that a lot of therapists are talking about this, but that was not touched at all in many schools. What would you say to them? What is your view on this self-healing or talking about these topics that are not academically or, evidence-based or whatever other BS?
Yeah, no, definitely. What's coming up for me right now, honestly, is that I've been through a lot of the trainings, the formal trainings for a lot of different modalities that have a lot of evidence, a lot of research behind. But I'm going to be the first one, to I'm not one to follow anything by the book. I go to the trainings and I take what resonates with me. And I do my own thing with it. So with EMDR, I before getting into EMDR, just to give you an example, I was very much into hypnosis. And I was learning about hypnosis, and I was going to as myself as a client, and then learning about how to continue or how to get someone to in that state. So when I took the EMDR training, it just reminded me so much of that training, which there's not a lot of research on. I think maybe more is coming out now, but it just resonated in that way. Well, I appreciate it because it had so much neuroscience research, and it was backed up by, it's almost like, because I'm a licensed mental health therapist, it's almost like that's the permission that I needed. Okay, there's evidence for this, so I'm going to go with this. But I don't follow Shapiro's protocol. I do more of the attachment based, but even that, I don't really do that. I like to say that I blend the EMDR, the bilateral eye movement, with parts work. And what I found, and the reason why I talk so much about inner child work, is that when you connect EMDR with parts work, like internal family systems, what comes out is, I would say, 95% of the time, my clients will automatically go to their inner child. They will connect with a child part across the childhood developmental stages. So I just go with that. So I actually don't really follow any particular protocol. I just follow what the client is presenting with. So I found patients that as they're in the EMDR, as we're doing the bilateral eye movement, and we check in, they're seeing their grandmother. So then and that, a lot of times they've passed away, or other, deceased loved ones. And we go there, and it's still within the context of EMDR. It's still within the context of internal, family systems or parts work. I even incorporate, I'm trained in sensory motor psychotherapy. So I even incorporate some movement, especially when there seems to be some stuck energy that just wants to be released. We stop and we check into the body. So, but if they're having in their mind's eye, they're seeing their deceased loved one, their grandparent or great grandparent, then we go there, and I just let them know, just go with that, just follow that, and let's see what happens. And they continue on that pattern. And the amazing thing is that they get so much out of it. So whether it's, you want to call it EMDR or ancestral healing, they automatically, the clients will go there. I don't even have to really tell them, hey, let's connect with your inner child, or let's connect with your, deceased loved ones. When we're working through these different modalities, and it automatically, our mind is just wired to guide us to that source within us that holds our medicine. So whether that is your inner child, or whether that is your ancestors, you will go. I feel like you will go there, or at least my clients, they go there on their own. And I very rarely specifically talk about in session in therapy about the inner child. I've never really, unless they ask directly, hey, I saw your Instagram and you posted about the ancestor, then we may talk. But I never, just to clarify, say, let's connect with your ancestors. It is usually something that comes up naturally when we're doing deep healing work, like EMDR really provides the container for that. And all the other modalities that I mentioned, like parts work and even the somatic psychotherapy or more of the body oriented psychotherapy, that is so, so powerful. And when you combine that, it's just natural. Like I said, your body just naturally knows what to do. And your body and your mind are all connected, and the clients will see in their mind's eye where they need to go next. So I don't know if that answered your question.
I love it, because how I'm also seeing it is that it's taking the science or, the research, the theories, and integrating to like making it, what's the word? It's like making it adaptable or for the client. So you're not following what a book that probably was made with the clients that they were used to create that evidence base were probably not the clients that you're seeing or very different clientele. Yeah. So you're taking that and making it more personable to whatever comes. And I love how you say how you help them get into their medicine. And as I'm hearing you speak, then the next question that comes into my mind is, how do you got there? How do you got to feeling confident that that's what you do? Because I bet, I'm here like assuming, but I bet that was not the case when you came out of, a recent graduate and all that. Like, how was that journey for you to be like, this is what I do?
Yeah. So no, you're right. It's been a long journey. I've been in this field for a very long time. My first internship was in 2005. I mean, so it's been a long time. It's been a journey. I want to say that at the beginning, I was heavily involved, or most of my work was in the community doing field work. I was going into people's homes. I was working in the emergency room, working with very intense, in the moment crises, a lot of crisis intervention. So I worked in child abuse investigations. I worked in a trauma level 1 center. So for those of you that don't know, the state of California has trauma centers throughout in very strategic locations, and trauma level 1 is the highest level of trauma. So this is where people get flown in, from just horrible car accidents, gunshot wounds, people that need to be, saved within minutes, so we would get people flown in, so that's where I started. And
that's just where you started, right?
That's where I started.
No, I'm just saying from like, wow, like from a recent graduate, that's where you started. They placed you right in the middle of it.
Yeah, wow. But you know what? That was my first job. That wasn't my internship, but that was my first job, like once I was out of school. But I'm so grateful for that experience, because I would not be able to do that now. I mean, I was in my early mid-20s at that time, and there is no way that now at this age, that I would even be able to do that. It takes a certain level of energy. And I would say also a certain level of, for me at least, and not for everyone, because I know there's people that have been doing this for years and they absolutely love it. That's their passion. But for me, I honestly didn't even know what I was walking into. I was so young, and I was just fresh out of school, and I wanted to make a difference. That was my mindset. And I wanted to work with children. I wanted to work with families. I didn't really know, I didn't have an idea of what that would look like. I just know that I wanted to work with, specifically with families. So that's kind of where I ended up, where I ended up working. But it was such a good experience, a very solid foundation to my clinical practice that came later on, because, I was with folks, when I was with the doctors, for example, when they had to deliver the news that their loved one didn't make it from that car accident, or their child actually, they're waking up from the shock of the car accident. And myself and the doctor had to let them know when they asked about their children that one of them didn't make it, so it was a lot of very intense emotional experiences. And there was also a lot of trauma for me, and I do want to say that there's a lot of adrenaline that happens, especially working in an emergency room at a level 1 trauma center. The adrenaline is always going. I remember working long nights and not feeling tired. because of all the adrenaline, that's pumping. So it was very, very toxic for me. At the end, I did that for a few years. There is a level of trauma, as the secondary transmission of trauma. And not only that, but also being in that moment with them, witnessing those just intense emotions is over time, of course, it accumulates and it can be very overwhelming, especially if you don't have a solid spiritual practice, which I didn't. Again, I was young, I was fresh out of school and fresh in life. Really, I was an adult, for the first time after graduate school. I had to be on my own. So I was really learning to navigate a lot of different things. But it was through that experience of feeling burned out and feeling like, okay, I can't do this. I need to do something else. And why am I feeling like this? Why am I feeling so tired? I'm so young. Why do I feel like I need to do something else with my life? I just graduated from this program. I'm in the process of getting licensed, but the reality was that I got burned out very quickly because I went in, and just got into very intense working environments very, very quickly. So through that process of trying to heal, so I did have the awareness, even as a 25 or 26-year-old, that I needed to do some healing. So I connected, or I just kind of, I wouldn't say connected, but I just kind of just fell upon a yoga studio, and that was really the doorway for me. It was through yoga. I didn't start doing yoga for the spiritual aspects of it. I just needed something to help me, to work. For me, it was more about fitness, and maybe I need to work out more. That will help me feel better. That's kind of how I got started. And then little did I know that just opened the door to everything else. And in a way, circled back to my own upbringing and reconnected me to a lot of my indigenous, healing practices. So that's kind of how I got started. And then little by little, with my career, at least, I transitioned to different environments that were better for me as a person. And that also I felt like I could help others. So from there, I started working with the VA. I worked with veterans. Then I started doing mental health and just doing a lot of therapy. And that's kind of where I stayed. That's where I found like the most, I guess, the combination of passion and the combination of just feeling the sense of rewarding without feeling so tired, without feeling so drained. And even that, of course, as you know, you're a therapist too, it comes with a lot of challenges. But having that initial foundation, everything else just kind of compare back to that. Just, I think my nervous system just, got a dosage, what do you call it, of immunity because of that crazy experience that I had the first few years of my career, that everything else just, it just fell in place accordingly. But it's been really through my own spiritual journey, starting with at that time. And even before that, if I really look back, it started way before that. But it has really been through that process of coming to terms with my spirituality, coming to terms with my own healing. And I think that's the biggest aspect, is that the more you heal, the more open you are. And because the more you heal, the more you want to heal, right? So it becomes like this journey that doesn't really end, right? It's almost like I'm here, but I want to continue learning about, or I want to continue healing from this. And it just expands. So that's more or less of how I started becoming more and more comfortable. And the more I healed, the more I learned, the more I started incorporating into my own practice with my clients. And it was very gradual. It was first, let's practice some affirmations and let's practice, and then eventually when I started learning more about yoga, I was like, hey, why don't you try these yoga poses as homework? And then it was, so it just became like little by little, it was natural because it's who I am, right? So when you are in therapy with a client, you bring yourself in, right? You bring everything that you've done for yourself, right? In the therapy room, but you bring everything. You bring your breath work, your yoga practice, you bring your meditation, everything that you do to contain and take care of yourself, you bring that into your therapy room. Yeah. So I feel like I can't not make that be part of my healing. So going back to your original question, is like when I learned these modalities, and wonderful, and there's so much research, at the same time, I feel like certain things aren't for me. And I think that's the beautiful thing about just being licensed and knowing that within
Yes.
reason, of course, we can't go all out, but
Yeah.
within reason, we do have a lot of freedom, to practice with our clients as long as we get consent and as long as they're on board. We do have a lot of freedom to practice, and we don't have to stick to the protocols as they are taught in the trainings. And that's one thing that I've learned, that even though, yes, the EMDR, that's what the research shows that works, then I won't call it EMDR. I'm going to call it just bilateral eye movement with child work, inner
Yeah.
child work.
Yeah.
And that's what I call it. So just to give you an example, I'm very flexible with what I've learned and what I've incorporated within my own healing. And that's kind of what I bring to the table when I'm working with clients.
No, I hear you. And I'm like, it resonates so much. And at the same time, as you're sharing your journey, I'm here thinking you heard the calling and you follow through. It was like, this is not for me. So what is next? And you kept looking. It sounded like you kept looking.
Yes.
And that takes courage that a lot of people sometimes struggle with. I don't want to call it motivation. In a way, I heard that. I hate that word, but it's, following through when they listen. So it sounded like that spiritual practice that you even had before, and then you evolve it and, it became something else, help you build that awareness of your own medicina. Kind of like the same that you're wanting to do with your clients. It's like you have done it and keep doing it with yourself, which is really beautiful. And can you share a little bit about your spiritual practice, if you don't mind?
Yes. So I want to go back to, just a little bit about my upbringing. So I was born and raised in a very religious household, prayer and talking about the angels and Jesus. And that was just like everyday life. So when I graduated from high school and was going to start college, I actually chose a college that had a specialization in theology. I majored in religious studies and theology. I studied that for 2 years. So even back then, even though I didn't know really what I wanted to do, when people ask me, what are you studying? And I would say, oh, it's religious studies and theology, and I want to be a professor. And I didn't have the words back then, but I think what I wanted back then, I wanted to be more like to just learn. I think I wanted to learn. And then I thought, well, what else can I do with all this knowledge? I need to share it. So I would say I wanted to be a professor, but I really don't know what. I think I was searching, so even back then, I've always been a seeker of knowledge and truth. And that golden thread has, like even now it's still coming up it's still there, that it's always seeking truth, my own, what I connect as truth, and always seeking knowledge. And so at that time, what I didn't expect though, is that majoring into that, I thought I was going to learn about my mother's religion, because this was a very specific denomination. It was a college, within that denomination. So it was very specific. So I thought I was going to be learning that. But this school is in Southern California, super liberal, super progressive. And as I got into this program, I was like, my mind was just like, just blown away with everything that the professors were talking about. So everything I had learned growing up is like, they were talking about Bible chapters that were not included in the Bible. For example, they were talking about the agnostic gospels and talking about the prophets that I had never heard of, and talking about and I was like, so I would come home and talk to my mom, like, did you know blah, 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 blah. And do you know that what they, this is what you showed me, but did you know that that's actually not true? And, I started like challenging. So through that process, I realized like, this is, I kind of got disillusioned with the religion, because again, I was coming to terms with the religion, with this and the spiritual practice. And my program was focused on teaching us the Bible and religious studies of the world. And also they were looking at the Bible as a anthropological work, from a cultural perspective, sociological perspective. So it was a lot of challenging of, at least for, at that time, that school was challenging a lot of things that I had believed my entire life. So that's kind of how that started. So I did that for a couple of years, and then I realized that this is not for me. This is not what I want. This is not what I had in mind. there was a part within me, and this is kind of where I go back to, there's always this part that just kind of guides us very gently. It's like a whisper, right? And that little whisper was very present with me back then. And I knew there was something else. I wanted to work with families. That was my thing. Like, I want to work with families. But, I don't know how all of this that I've learned, how it fits in. I found social work through that journey. I really connected with that just because the heavy emphasis on family systems and understanding a person within their environment, and the focus is on activism. So I was really drawn to that profession. So that's where I went. And, it wasn't until I think going back to your original question, for me, with my spiritual practice, it didn't come into a concrete form, like I said earlier, until I had to really come to terms with difficulties in my life. And one of the things that happened at the same time that I was transitioning from work, I was actually, on a personal level, transitioning from a toxic relationship, ending a toxic relationship. So ending that relationship in some way kind of I think that relationship was numbing a lot of the parts within me. A lot of the wounded parts within me were being pieced, with that relationship, or at least they didn't feel as strong because that relationship was numbing a lot of that. So when that ended, it's like I had to deal with everything, the generational issues and my own lived experiences and the traumas that came through that. So I didn't have another choice but to start connecting. I just knew that I couldn't handle all of these changes within myself. So I started meditating. I actually stopped going to church. The interesting part is that I actually stopped going to church. And I said, this is not helping, and I just connected with what I found soothing. And I think the interesting part is that the universe just kind of placed people in my life that have helped me in my spiritual practice along the years. So I've always had mentors. And that's one of the things that one of the things I want to emphasize is that I have not done this alone. There's always been, thankfully, someone guiding me, So when I started connecting with my inner child, I was in therapy, and it was through that process that I experienced connecting with my inner child for the first time. When I was, for example, connecting with my ancestors, or when I started this journey, I had a coworker that I went to and I said, hey, I had this experience. I don't know what this is about. And she just kind of took me under her wing, and she was like, well, let me tell you about myself. Let me tell you how what I've been working through. And so she shared with me a lot of her own journey and the stuff that she does to help herself and connect with her ancestors and do all these ancestral healing. And then that just opened the door to other things. So right now I would say that my spiritual practice involves connecting with the universe, connecting with life, connecting with joy, connecting with my ancestors in a very deep emotional way. And I'm not talking about, just setting time aside and meditate. It's more of as a way of life. I don't go to church, I don't have a church that I belong to, but I have a community that I connect with. And I guess, you can say that together, we help each other stay connected to that part within us, because you do need support, right? As you know, in whatever you do need others. And life gets in, life is hard, regardless if you have a solid spiritual practice or not. Life is going to continue happening as life needs to happen. So we need others to help us. So a lot of my spiritual practice now, it just involves community, not in a church setting, but community of like-minded people that I consider friends, that I consider just fellow, also like mentors, in a way, elders that just guide me when I need some guidance. And just meditation and the yoga and, and the ancestors, and just kind of continuing to develop that relationship. That's a whole other conversation, but that's a journey that I've been on for, I would say, since all of this started taking place in my life, all these changes, which right now it's been almost 10 years, I would say. And it's been a process, but that's more or less of what I do now. I don't know if that answered your question.
No, it does. Because it sounds like, I love how you mentioned that it's a way of life. Because a lot of times people are like, give me your spiritual practice. Do you sit for 5 minutes? Do you do this? How many breaths? Do you do the 5, 6, all this structure? And it sounds like you just kind of integrate and go. And what I keep hearing as you share more about your story is that from little, you've had that strong intuition and that strong connection, that you've been guided. And then as soon as you listen, which is what I usually tell clients and the people that I coach and I mentor, is like, as soon as you start listening and following through that inner guidance, that it feels different from anxiety. Sometimes it gets confusing, but the more that you listen to it, the stronger it gets and the stronger I feel the connection. And as soon as you respond to it, things start to like flow and open in ways that you would have been able to logically plan ahead. But it takes a lot of surrender and a lot of like trust.
Yeah,
For many,
absolutely.
that is one of the hardest, is like, how can I trust? Because the inner world, it's been what I cannot trust, or it has hurt me with my traumas and my experiences, that I don't trust my body. I don't trust my sensations. I don't want to feel my sensations. I don't want to hear my inner guidance. And that part then tends to be really hard. But that's what I keep hearing as you share your stories. Like, you had that strong internal connection with that inner guidance that would like send you, people can call them like earth angels and all this, to guide you and to open doors. And then you trusted and you went there, and then that opened other doors.
Yeah.
But it takes that courage and surrender and trust.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of surrendering, because there is not a lot that, when life happens, there's not much we can do, right? People hurt you, people betray you, and there's nothing you can do about their behavior, right? And you can only surrender to what life is bringing you and use that as opportunities for growth. And that's where the courage comes in, right? To be able to say, okay, how can I take this drama, this mess, and use it to further my healing, not just from this, from this relationship, or not just from this breakup, but to heal the generational patterns that keep showing up over and over and over. And then awareness too, right? To be able to have the awareness. And that for me is the biggest thing, because if you don't have awareness of what's happening, we will just continue, just human nature is to continue doing what we do, because that's what's routine, that's what's normal. Naturally, we want to keep homeostasis, we want to keep balance at all costs. So when we do gain some awareness, that you can't undo that. You can't unlearn the awareness that you gained. Once you realize, that there are things that you need to work on, you can pretend like, okay, I'll ignore that for now and I'll continue moving forward. And, but that you will always know that that is something that you need to address. And a lot of times until you address it, it won't leave you alone. It's like this little voice, this little whisper that just keep just nagging you until you listen, until you do what you need to do to take care of yourself, or to heal, or to do something about it, to take an action. Right. Yeah. So I feel like awareness, and you said courage, and surrender, all of those 3 components are key, for growth and for healing. Really, for any kind of healing to happen, you need that. You need those 3 elements present, because it is hard. That's where the courage comes in. It's so hard to sit with the discomfort of your inner child, for example. That is so hard. I mean, we talk about it in a very, I think with the Instagram and the social media, it's been romanticized a lot, the concept of our inner child and our ancestors. But let me tell you, from my own experience, it is not easy when you really go there, when you really connect with your inner child, or I should say, because we're talking about both, with your ancestors. It's not easy. I've had so many experiences where I've felt worse, actually, because it's hard to sit with the discomfort of the trauma. It's hard to hear the messages that are coming through. And if you don't have guidance and you're connecting with, let's say, for example, your ancestors, it can feel scary, so it's really, really important to always look for a guide, someone that can help you to be in relationship with someone that can really guide you. It doesn't have to be a therapist. It could be a friend that you have that just so maybe a few steps ahead of you in terms of their healing, for example. But it's really, really important to keep that in mind, that this is not easy work. When you're going in there with the courage, with the awareness, and the intention to heal, there's going to be moments of discomfort and pain and difficulties, but that's just part of the journey.
Mm-hmm. I love so many things, and I feel like we can talk for
Yeah,
hours. And I'm also looking at the
we
time. But
can.
one of the things that I want to piggyback that I feel like it's important is that aspect that you're bringing, how it's been romanticized in IG and in social media, ancestral healing, inner child healing, even healing. Process your trauma, manage your triggers. There's all these ideas of like, when you do that, things will change and everything will be fine. And it's like, it's not that way. And there's also what is the human experience, which,
Yeah.
I mean, I know from a Buddhist perspective, is like the suffering is part of life. But as humans, we want to like avoid any suffering, and we want to like move away from it and be like, there's no suffering. But how can we also, there's parts of the human experience that are just part of it, like kind of like human nature, that you have to eat and go to the bathroom and hydrate yourself. Yes, you can use your power of the mind to like maybe for a week don't eat or whatever, but there's going to come a moment that you're going to have to eat, because that's just
Mm-hmm.
part of what is the human experience. And sometimes we forget that there's some things that you can work everything, but you still experiencing that grief, how you mentioned, how can
Mm-hmm.
that you use it for something else? How can
Mm-hmm.
that be the alchemist for something else? What's the lesson
Mm-hmm.
behind it? What's
Mm-hmm.
the, what do you have to learn? What are you breaking? What are you helping? What are you? And that takes so much of, I feel like, awareness and feeling grounded. So it's not like, oh my
Mm-hmm.
God, trigger, deal with it, take it out. And
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
healed. I'm healed. I did my trauma healing stuff. It's like,
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And the interesting part is that every stage of life will bring you different challenges
oh
that will
yeah,
trigger your trauma in a different way. You know,
yes,
so I became a mother a year and a half ago, or a little bit more than a year and a half ago, almost 2 years now. And that has brought in so many other parts within myself that I thought I had already worked through. And that is just challenging me in a whole other way that has really propelled me to continue my journey of healing. So the way I like to see it, whenever I hear someone say, I'm healed and let me show you what I did to get healed, that's, for me, that's a red flag. Because there is, I think, just living in this life, this human experience, there is so much that we're working through from our own lifetime, but also from the karmic patterns that have been transferred on from other, well, at least from my perspective, from other
yeah,
lifetimes, from our previous generations. And a lot of times we have moments when we feel good. I definitely had weeks where I feel the sense of joy, and I feel grounded, and I feel like I'm present. And then something happens, like I hear from this toxic family member, they text me, and then it's like, oh, there it goes. My good 2 weeks. And I'm telling you, that's now after over 15 years of trying to work through my own difficulties, right? We all have those moments because we're humans. I don't think that we can ever say we healed. We can improve significantly. Like when we're talking about, let's go back to PTSD and complex trauma. There are very specific symptoms
mm-hmm.
that we can reduce through therapy. You
Yeah,
can learn how to reduce these symptoms so you can sleep better, so you can feel more grounded, so you're not getting so your nervous system and your mind is not getting hijacked into the past. And there's very specific tools, but we're not talking about healing, that we're talking about just life, healing and emotional wounding, right? That is going to be a lifelong journey that's going to keep coming up. So when we're healing from, let's say we had a very difficult relationship with our mother growing up, and now that I'm a mother, maybe I thought I had worked through that, my pre-mother self. And I did, maybe I did. I was good. I was able to come to terms. But then I became my mother, or a mother, and I'm
mother.
noticing that I'm becoming my mother, right? And it's like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
wait a minute, so there's things that I still need to work on. There's areas of growth that are showing up. It doesn't mean that I haven't healed. It doesn't mean that I have not progressed on my path. But being a mom for the first time is presenting new opportunities for healing. And the awareness, the courage, all of that is it's going to have to come into place if we want to continue moving on our path. So I'm not one to endorse the idea that I'm healed, I'm good now, like come learn with me, I can help. I don't endorse that, because I think we're always moving forward. We're always improving, but there's just life. And, the interesting thing is that, at my age, I want to continue growing. I don't want to think of myself as like, I'm done, I'm
Right,
healed.
right. Where I got there.
I
I got
want
where.
to, yeah. I
And
I'm
children will continue to like bring you back and remind you like
absolutely at
at their
every
stages.
stage,
Yes,
right?
at every
Because
stage.
one thing when they're babies and they're,
Mm-hmm.
teenagers, that's a whole
Yeah.
other, you're gonna have, you're forced to deal with a whole other set of issues,
Yeah.
and then they're adults. So it really life. That's just how it is, right? And there's always something. Sometimes it may not be a child, but it could be a boss. Just
Mm-hmm.
having, you think you're worked through all of your childhood difficulties, and then you have this boss that just
Mm-hmm.
reminds you, and that happens a lot with a boss. Isn't it
Yes.
so interesting? But then you have this boss that just triggers you, and you're so upset. You don't even know why, and then as you start processing, you realize the similarities with someone from your past, and then it gives you an opportunity to work through that wound or that trauma. So
Mm-hmm.
life is, I believe, is always giving us opportunities for growth, but we do have to, going back to that, we do have to be able to have the awareness to take it, to take that opportunity, and then the courage to do something about it, take an
Mm-hmm.
action. Yeah.
Yes, yes. I'm here thinking of any specific message for other therapists that are trying to figure out, what do they believe in terms of how the work that they do and integrating different modalities? Like, what would be a message that you would give to them?
Mm. I would say to do their own healing, to really, really sit with their own discomfort, with their own. So, whatever approach you gravitate towards, that's an indication that that's the medicine that you should take. So, so if you notice that, as a new therapist or as a new mental health, like newly licensed mental health provider, if you notice that you're really gravitating towards the field of, let's say trauma, or you want to do EMDR, then take that as a window for your healing, a window to within yourself, and to really tap into that. What is this about? What is this? Because sometimes the ego wants us to get all of these trainings and to get all of this experience and do all of these credentials and all that stuff. But the ego, it will take over if we let it. But that's not healing. Our ego is just looking to amplify itself, to show how much you know, to show how much
The
you've learned.
separation. I'm so good.
Yeah,
Yes, yes.
but that's not where I'm talking about the heart and the emotional healing. That's not where healing happens, right? So, but I think it could be a good window into that. So if you notice a specific interest, a specific area of interest, look into that and see what that is. How does that come back to you? What are some of the patterns that you can work through yourself, or maybe even your family lineage or your generational patterns? How can you heal and work from that perspective on yourself, on your family, or so I think it's just a good way to tap into what the medicine that you need, because a lot of times, unconsciously or not, we follow a specific path in our career because we're searching for our own medicine.
Mm-hmm.
So really I would
Mm-hmm.
encourage those to really. I didn't have that. That's why I'm encouraging.
Yeah, yeah.
I just went through, the certifications and the licensing and all that. And it's like, I wish I would have had a chance at that time in those years to say, wait a minute, what is this saying? What areas within myself are being amplified through this process? What do I need to work on? What are some of the things that I still need to heal from? So yeah, that will be my advice. And also finding a community of like-minded people, colleagues or friends, or, people that share your beliefs, that this message resonates with as well.
Mm-hmm. So important. Again, I feel like I can, like, there's so many things that you're sharing that it resonates a lot with my story in terms of all that. And I'm like here hearing you, and I'm like, ooh, let's collaborate and all these things, but I'll contact you later for that. But in terms
we
of,
can continue on when
I
you're on my
know,
podcast.
right?
We
Yes,
can
on
continue our
yours,
convo.
exactly. But in terms of the fire round questions, so this is like complete the sentence. My unique and special gift is
My empathy,
I am reclaiming
my intuitive gifts, or my intuition.
Yeah. I no longer subscribe to.
Playing small.
I love that one. Yeah. If my ancestor would speak, they would say,
Tú eres nuestra voz. You are our voice.
and my wish for you, meaning the audience, is
that you continue on your journey of healing. Well, maybe backtrack, of awareness, healing, and transformation. Whatever that looks like for you, to continue on that path.
Oh, Rosa, thank you so much. And can you share your current or upcoming offers and how can people find about you and connect with you?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram. I'm pretty active on Instagram on innerhealing_paths.
And it will be here
and then,
in the show notes. So yeah.
Okay. And I have a website with my name, Rosa Shetty, LCSW.com. And I have a podcast that I just released in October. So I have about 4 or 5 episodes all about ancestral healing and reconnecting. And this month of November, I'm going to be switching gears and provide different topics. But for the month of October, it was all about that. So if you're interested in learning more about ancestral healing and reclamation of your ancestral medicine, take a listen to those episodes.
Yeah. And just go and follow. I love your reels and the ones about the affirmations with the images in the background. And
thank you.
They're so soothing and all that. So sometimes it's like one of those, like you feel that your medicine through them. So for anyone, go and give her a follow and listen to Rosa's podcast and all that. And I look forward to continuing our conversation down the road or any collabs.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I feel like it's so needed, especially for newly and recent graduates, how, they're trying to do that reclamation, but they're still so indoctrinated. I feel like after 10 years in the field, now I'm like 13. After 10 is when I was feeling like, oh, I can do this. I don't care. But I don't care, but like I can be myself because I am farther away from the indoctrination of school.
Yes, absolutely.
And, all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. It just takes time. But I'm hoping that through, just being able to share this message, that it's okay to connect with your intuition, that it's okay to connect with your own spirituality, that you can bring yourself into the session, that you don't have to leave yourself at the door when you're connected. Yeah. Like actually people want people want you. I think for, like you said, a lot of times that we are told to not talk about ourselves, transference and countertransference is like heavily, heavily emphasized, right? But what I found is that the more that I connect with them on a human level, the more healing it is, and again, everyone has to, it's a journey for everyone, but I just want to let you all know that it's okay to be yourself. It's okay to bring yourself fully into that room and connect with your clients in that way.
Yes. And for those that are listening, if you listen to this and tag us, add both of us on Instagram, Facebook, wherever you want to use your social media. So that way we can amplify this voice, not only for this podcast, but also for the medicine, la medicina that Rosa Shetty, I always keep saying Shetty. Yeah, Shetty.
It's okay.
Yeah, brings into the world.
No, that's fine. Either one.
Yeah. I don't want to say like an American. I'm Puerto Rican. Like, what the heck? Like, I'm Boricua.
No,
like,
you're okay.
Shetty. Yeah, but anyhow.
Yeah, okay.
But thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here.
Of course.
Any last messages?
Liliana, thank you for having me.
Oh, welcome.
And for this wonderful conversation.
Yeah. And for the listeners, we'll see you next week.
Okay.
Thanks for listening. Licensed Psychologist Now What? To make sure you don't miss any episode, make sure to subscribe via your favorite podcast player and to join our email list via our website. Lastly, I will appreciate if you would rate and review our podcast to help us reach more folks that can benefit from the information provided here. Until next time, bye-bye.